And you're live, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Bird. Good evening and welcome to this evening's meeting of the Performance Governance and Audit Committee. My name is Councillor Maddie Thompson. I'm the Vice Chairman of this committee, sitting in for Councillor Bell. Before we commence the business of the meeting, there are a few housekeeping issues to run through. We're streaming this meeting live as well as recording, and by being present in the meeting, you are giving your consent to being recorded. When invited to speak, please turn on your microphone and speak clearly, referencing a page or paragraph number when referring to the agenda papers. Keep your contributions as clear and concise as possible and ensure your microphones remain off when not speaking, as this is important for the live streaming to be heard clearly. Finally, can I draw your attention to the notices on the agenda papers regarding the different levels of flooring within the chamber and advise that the fire exit is on the door behind this top table. Members also please note there's a supplementary pack for this evening that was circulated this morning. That contains the minutes of the previous meeting along with the matters arising. Right, Miss Bird, do we have any apologies for absence apart from Councillor Bell?
Chairman, no, apart from Councillor Bell, that's all we've got. Thank you for tonight.
Thank you very much. Okay, members, item 3. Please find those minutes. Please find the minutes of the last meeting in the supplementary pack. It's recommended that the minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of January are approved as a true and accurate record. May I take them as read, first of all, members? Okay. Right, I was going to say, I so propose, could I have that seconded, please? Sorry, I've got to spot it, Councillor Spenceley first. Are we agreed? Thank you very much. Item 4 is matters arising. You'll have seen those in the supplementary pack. Item 5 is declarations of interest to disclose the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interests, other registrable interests and non-registrable interests relating to items of business on the agenda, having regard to paragraph 9 and appendix B of the Code of Conduct for members. Members are reminded they're also required to disclose any such interests if they become aware should the need arise through the meeting. Members, anything? No takers, thank you very much. Item 6 is public participation. There is none. None was received. Item 7 is the internal audit report. Now this comes in 5 parts, so I hope members you'll agree with me that we'll take each report in turn and its recommendations, followed by any questions, of course. So for item 7A, I'm going to hand over to Messrs Winter and Billingham. They're going to take these between them. I'm not quite sure exactly how, but please carry on. Sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Would you mind me asking a question before the gentlemen start, because I know how long this process can go on. Could I actually ask why this agenda is so long tonight? There's a heck of a lot of papers to read, and surely it may have been beneficial for it to be split into 2 meetings. I mean, if you look how heavy the latter part of this meeting is, and to try and stay focused, I think it's going to be quite challenging. So when you had your pre-meets, was that raised by yourself or the chair about the length of this meeting, please?
Not the idea of splitting it to start with, no, but it is obviously an option if we seem to be carrying on for too long. If we go on too late, I shall certainly adjourn for another day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stan. Right. Please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I will take the first report, which is page 7 of your pack, which is our periodic progress report. So this is covering the completion of our 23-24 internal audit plan, and you will see there that we've made really good progress in terms of the plan for the year, and it's proportionate to where we are in the year as well. So a large proportion of the work is done, and tonight we will be taking you through further 3 reports that have been finalised. There are 3 final reviews that are left to be completed for the year. One is in draft report stage, which is our fraud strategic risk assessment review, which is currently being cleared with management. The other 2 are scheduled or are underway in terms of our 2 pieces of finance work. We're just being mindful of obviously the finance team and the work that they have to do at this time of year with the year end and also the external audit work. So agreed with the Director of Finance, we have just pushed those back later into this quarter, but we're really confident that we'll have those wrapped up and in time for our Head of Internal Audit opinion, which comes to you as part of our reporting in the summer. So I'm really pleased with progress. I will not go on in terms of any further points on that and happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. So the recommendation on this is that the committee considers comments and approves the following. That applies to all the reports. So we'll start with just the progress report. So I so propose. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Pratt. So, members, any questions or observations? Councillor Stamp.
Sorry.
Don't
Just really a question on the review of the target that was not met, which is the management of the Section 106 funding. Will we go later on in the report? Because I'm sure I'll read further on that it was discussed, or it's highlighted a bit further on. Because I think, I can't remember, I don't remember, I recognise you. I don't recognise the other gentleman. But I'm sure it's been brought up on many occasions about the Section 106 reporting. So have you done anything about it, as in, I know you continually report it, but what is happening regarding it?
So these are a set of KPIs that are akin to our delivery plan. So they're actually performance metrics of us as a team and what we have to deliver to. So we're being self-critical here. This is the production of our report and issuance of our report at the end of the closing meeting. So we didn't quite meet our 3-week timetable to report on it. So it's nothing, yes. So it's actually to do with the process of agreeing our reports and issuing them. So this is not management. This is actually, we had a slight delay in it getting through our quality assurance process. Obviously the importance of Section 106 and ensuring that we're factually accurate, etc. So this is just us being self-critical in that way.
Thank you, that's good to know that it's them and not us.
Isn't it? Thank you. So members, we agree the recommendation? Thank you very much. So 7B is the follow-up recommendations report. Please, sir.
Yep, so page 17 of the pack shows the follow-up report. There were 4 recommendations due to be followed up this quarter, and 2 were completed for cybersecurity. 2 for management of property have not been completed and are classed as overdue with revised implementation dates. There is a further recommendation overdue for knowledge management from 2021, but this did not have a follow-up date due for this quarter. Hopefully all overdue recommendations will be resolved by the end of this financial year, as they have revised implementation dates for March, which is now, so hopefully by the end of this month. All other outstanding recommendations are not yet due, and they are from 23-24. And happy to take any questions on that report.
Thank you, members. Again, the recommendation is to consider, comment and approve. So, members, do you have any questions? Councillor Stamp, where you go.
A couple. Just on the cyber security on page 22, and I notice it's closed, but is this including members? I'm sure at the last one, 2 months ago, because I wasn't at the last meeting, or whenever this came up before, did I ask if members are actually being checked on this cybersecurity? This box fish, you know, we all have to fill these things in. Or is this just on staff? Well, that sounded very posh for me, didn't it? Staff, not staff.
Please.
Yep, so the agreed action, as stated, just refers to staff and doesn't refer to members. So if that action has been completed, then we would sign off the action and the recommendation as done. So
can I come back? Is it possible to include members, or would that not actually come into this reporting process? Because members are just as easily targetable to be, is it catfished? What's it called? I don't know. Cyberfish. Oh, is it boxfish? Yeah. Box. Sorry, not catfish.
I think that's somewhere else.
I think I've gone as red as my shirt. Yes, and no, serious. On a serious note, because I think we members do need to keep up, and I'm guilty that I haven't done all mine at the moment. So you know, but can that be brought in, Mr. Holmes?
Too, yes, Miss Cardy's going to help us out.
Oh, thank you.
Sorry, that next to me.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Yes, we are monitoring members' completions of boxfish.
Thank you.
So we will provide those, and we will chase those that haven't completed them. And you'll notice from the members' brief that there's a reminder of those to be completed as well, so that we try and prompt members every week to do those.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Spenceley.
Yeah, thank you. Page 25, action agreed, letter C. Where work is contracted out, the council should ensure that procurement, and then it just ends. So I'm just wondering what was recommended there.
Yeah, unfortunately, I did notice actually today when I was reading the report, it has actually taken off the bottom of that sentence. So off the top of my head, I don't know what the rest of that sentence says, but I can provide that to you after the meeting if you'd like to read the final part of it.
Thank you.
Yes, please. Thank you. Councillor Stills.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Page 24, and this is one that I've been chasing for, well, when I was chair of PG&A, and that is the asset management plan. You notice it's been crossed out and crossed out and crossed out and crossed out, and it now says 31st of March 2024. Is this actually going to happen? I think this is more for Mr. Holmes than yourselves.
Chairman, there's two parts to this. Obviously, there's some work that's been undertaken by Mr. Butcher, and that's the asset management strategy itself. And I think Mr. Butcher would like to update members because that's coming to council, coming to Strategy and Resources very soon, I believe.
Thank you. Mr. Butcher.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, so the asset management strategy has been signed off by CLT. We've got a briefing with members from two of the working groups, the Asset Management Working Group and Corporate Projects Working Group on Monday. And that's ahead of the strategy coming to Strategy and Resources on the 14th of March. The recommendation is that the strategy goes to full council because it does have implications wider than just assets. But that strategy has been completed. What sits underneath that is the asset management plan, and that's the work that Matt Harwood-White has been completing with Frank. And that's detailing all of the assets and making sure they're all in one system. I'm not certain if that is fully completed, but the work has commenced and we have a member of staff seconded into that role to make sure that all of our assets are identified and in place so that we can do the cyclical repairs and monitoring as sort of outlined within the audit.
Thank you. Councillor Sam.
Could I just ask you a follow up on that? Can somebody say why or how this has slipped all this time? There's got to be very good reasons for it, and I think it, especially for people who haven't been on it as long as what we have, why has it taken so long to actually produce this? Because like it says there, it started in 2021.
Ms. Green.
So I can give an update on that, Chairman. That is simply a question of resources, a mixture of staff, physical staff resources to do this work, and secondly, identifying a suitable software that would enable us to use it to record this information, to use it in a useful way. So there has been two parts to it. One is to determine the appropriate software and implement it, and secondly to allocate the resources. So both those pieces of work have been done. We have identified a software solution, the staff have had the training, we have got the resources in place, and we are currently loading all of that data onto the software now. What we have understood now, having sort of started the work and we're a few months in, is that it is a huge piece of work. And I think in the second part of, there's a second recommendation underneath here, which is relating to the actual data input. And it does highlight that the project is likely to take 6 months. And I think that the way that is going, it is likely to take a bit longer than that. So I think what we will need to do is to revise the implementation date. But what I can give members reassurance is there is a huge amount of work that's been done on this. And we're making really, really good progress. We're getting these things in place. Once all the data is loaded into the software, it will then provide that information so that on a monthly basis we can monitor the leases, the licenses, the property checks that need to be done. So once it's done, it's a huge piece of work, but once it's done, it's then just maintaining it so that that big piece of work is done. So that will be an absolute amazing piece of work when it's finished. And it is, as I say, we are making really, really good progress.
I think with all due respect, I think many people, many members would understand it's a huge piece of work. It's just really the length of time it's taken. And I do take on board what you say about the lack of resources, staff resources. I hope not financial resources, because you've come back, not you, Mr. Holmes, come back to committees often to actually ask for more funding for things to happen on a regular basis for this council to operate more smoothly. Yes, I understand software packages, but is it a software package that works in isolation, or is it a software package that's going to speak to something else in the whole of the district council? So we don't want something not speaking to something. Yeah, so I'll reword that nicely. Can you reassure the committee?
So I can provide the reassurance that the software that we're using is utilising an existing package that we have got, so it does feed in to all our other software and asset information. Yes, we were looking at a potential for a bespoke piece of software, but actually some of the time has been spent actually understanding how we can better utilise and some of the options within our existing software, and we've been able to do that, and we've been able to get the company in to do the training with the staff and to implement it. So yes, it is very well underway, and it will be extremely useful because it does feed into all our other systems.
Finally, Madam Chair, when that is signed off, you will get a round of applause.
Thank you, members.
Councillor Stills?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Basically, the answer to my question was then it's not going to be ready by the 31st of March.
That's correct, members.
Thank you. So, members, can we agree the recommendation? Thank you. Right, now we have 7C, housing benefits, and again, the same recommendation, consider, comment and approve. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is our final report on the housing benefits review that conducted. It's page 27 onwards of the pack. So this produced a substantial design opinion and a moderate operational opinion. So you'll see here within the report there is a positive outcome in terms of the strength of the control environment, and there were some minor operational elements that we picked up, which naturally sometimes happens with a high volume kind of area. This included the process of new applications, change of circumstances, and any related processes around debt recovery and write-off. So I think, once again, it's a positive report on some of the work the council are doing in this area. There's clear adherence to policies and procedures. And I would say the two minor recommendations that are raised are quite minor in terms of ensuring that the version control and review process on policies occurs. We didn't find any concerns about the policies being out of date or not reflective of the process, so that's important to note. And then the timeliness of application changes, but we obviously have to ensure that they go through appropriate quality control, so sometimes there are those minor delays. So again, a positive report, and happy to take any questions on it.
Members. Councillor Pratt.
I don't have a question, I just have a compliment to the staff that have come up with knowing the amount of work that Ben's have to do. And just to come up with two minors, I think it is to be commended how well they've done.
Thank you for that, and heartily agree with it. Thank you. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Chair. Going down to the overpayment of housing benefit, £636,000. Is there some explanation for that? Is that going back 20 years, or what? Also, we've written off £217,000. Is that something that we can have an answer for while we've written it off? Thank you.
Do we have an answer for that, Ms. Green?
So, members, overpayments are housing benefit that has been paid to a customer incorrectly or resident incorrectly, and that can be for a number of reasons. And what we will always attempt to do is to try and avoid the overpayment occurring in the first place, but unfortunately sometimes that is inevitable, where customers have change of circumstances and perhaps they don't realise they need to tell us straight away. So that's why the overpayment occurs. What we do try to do is try to minimise the overpayment, so that when we do get told about the changes, that we react and amend that customer's claim straight away. So we have very stringent timescales for doing that. We set ourselves 8 working days to make those changes. So again, that goes to minimise the level of overpayments. Once the overpayment occurs, we will do all we can to recover that money. Generally, what we would do is we recover that from the customer's ongoing benefit. If they stopped being entitled to benefit, then we would invoice them and look for that to be repaid through an invoice arrangement. Unfortunately, there are some times where it's just not possible to recover the debt. So, for example, if a customer passes away, or they become bankrupt, or there's just no likelihood of getting the money back. Unfortunately, when people are on benefit, they're on very low incomes, and it may just not be possible for them to repay the money. So there is a limited amount of time and effort we can put into trying to recover that money. So that will then go through that process. Thank you, members.
Okay. Oh, Councillor Stamp.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I was a little bit shocked, the same as I always forget people's names. Don't take offence. Please don't take offence. It's not meant. I've put acceptable but not great on my papers when I've written it down, Madam Chair. When you have on page 32, it says what I did like about this, and I'd like to commend whoever did recruit them. There was also a new document created by a trainer hired by another local authority that fully detailed the process staff are expected to follow. I thought that was brilliant. And I think whoever, actually, if you are bringing in outside resources to support, yeah, we do need it. We are a small authority, so I've put a really big tick and good in big letters on that. But it does bother me that, okay, I have read it in great detail, and I understand what Ms Green's just said about it should be within, was it 8 days you said? I think I read somewhere. But there are some cases that seem to take a lot longer. Which are those the ones that are costing us far more money then? Because I need to try and understand why we've got such a huge amount of money that's been overpaid. Is there like an average? Do you know what I mean?
I would just say, members, that this is money that has been overpaid going back to 2005.
The 600 is, but
yeah.
Then you've got smaller figures down below, haven't you? It says from 1819 the council's written up. From 1819, the council's 217,000.
That's correct.
So I understand it's gone down. I did read it. But
yeah, I mean that the authority pays. I can double check, but I believe it's somewhere in the region currently about £8 to £9 million a year in benefits. So proportionally, it's a very tiny amount. What the government, the way that the scheme works is the government asks us to pay out the benefit to customers. And then at the end of the year, we essentially have to reclaim that. They pay us on account on a monthly basis. And at the end of the year, they look at our performance and they look at how much overpayment has been made against the amount of benefit that has been paid out. So they set us a percentage, a very small percentage. And what happens is, if we have overpayments that exceed the amount the government are expecting us to make, because they accept there will always be some overpayment, we get a financial penalty for that. We're not able to claim all of that money back. And I'm really pleased to say we've only had 1 year since I've worked at the authority, 20 odd years, where we've hit that penalty. Every other year we've kept the overpayments to an acceptable level, and we've stayed within that threshold that the government sets.
So just for confirmation, it's not costing us then? No. It's costing the government? Yes.
Absolutely. As long as we keep that overpayment level low, there's not a direct impact on us. It's when those overpayments start to create a high level that it has that significant financial impact on us.
Okay, so that 1 year, was it small?
It wasn't. And it was, and in my defence, it was a year when I wasn't here.
Okay, Councillor Bassington.
Just as a matter of interest, just if there is, if we are in deficit and we are penalised, do we have a mechanism to reclaim the money back, or do we just write it off? Is that how it works?
We do make all efforts to recover the money, but inevitably there are, as you've seen from the report, some that we can't recover.
Thank you.
Okay, members, thank you. Agree the recommendation? Yeah. Thank you. So now we have 7D, which is homelessness and temporary accommodation report.
So this report is on page 39 of the pack. The purpose of this audit was to provide assurance over how the council manages its homelessness and temporary accommodation responsibilities and how effective these arrangements are. We've given a moderate assurance rating for both the design of the control framework and the operation of controls, which is a positive result for an area of high demand. There are lots of areas of strength as shown in the report on page 42. However, we have raised 3 medium priority rated recommendations, which are around the use of bed and breakfast accommodation for a family and enhancing quality control processes for when the council decides whether or not there is a priority need. Happy to take any questions on that report.
Councillor Stam.
Yeah, thank you. I think they do brilliant on this. I think it's Damien and Helen. They're always absolutely fantastic. But can you talk us through the process? You've just said about you've offered them advice. That last bit you said, you've offered them advice on how to, did you say deal with it or something, the process? I can't remember exactly. It just tweaked my imagination when you said that.
I don't think I said that about offering advice. So
Process, you said, didn't you say a process? Who was it? Was nobody paying attention, members?
said, so there's recommendations around enhancing quality control processes when the council decides whether or not there is a priority need. So I think at the moment there is no quality control over when they decide there is no priority need and not to award temporary accommodation. But I think there is a quality control process when they decide there is a priority need, but I think sometimes that's not adequately documented in some of the testing that we found.
Okay. So can I speak to Mr. Gaylor?
Yes,
so
of course.
Can you tell us what that process is then, just so we understand it a bit further, please?
Can I defer to Helen?
The screen grass.
Sorry, Helen.
Thanks.
Yeah, I can talk you through that. So we've always had a outcome and investigation sheet, which is documented the approach details, reason for approach, reason for priority need, and that details down. So that's the Homeless Officer's responsibility to complete that. That then goes to a senior officer to check through, make sure that we've got the adequate documents as well to back that up. And then that is given a signature for accepting emergency accommodation need and duty. What we hadn't got in place at the time of the audit was the opposite side of that, where we made, almost always there's a very clear no priority need. So we don't at that point make a priority need decision as such, because we still have duties to work with them, but we're not providing emergency accommodation. So the recommendation which we took on board immediately after the audit was that where somebody approaches requesting emergency accommodation, if we are making a negative decision at that point, even if we go on to further duties, we complete the investigation and outcome sheet in the same way to detail why we've refused emergency accommodation. That's then checked and signed off by a senior officer. So that has been implemented from the,
Thank you. Thank you, members. Agree the recommendation? Thank you very much. So last but not least, 7E, climate change and sustainability.
Yes.
And, same recommendation. Sorry, I apologise.
That's okay. So the final report is on page 53, which is, as the Chair said, on climate change and sustainability. The audit reviewed the adequacy of policies and strategies to help achieve the Council's environmental aims. It did not examine whether the Council is on target to meet those aims. We raised no priority rated recommendations, and we provided a substantial level of assurance for both the design and operation of controls, which is a very good result. We did highlight 3 observations around the misalignment of net zero targets between Maldon and the County Council, documenting all sources of council carbon emissions, which was not complete at the time of the audit, and benchmarking of the climate action strategy. But overall, it was an area with well-designed and fully operating controls. Happy to take any questions.
Councillor Slam.
It's I must declare an interest. I'm an Essex County Councillor, but it's no other interest, just that I am one. Can anybody tell me what the risks are? Because we're not aligned with Essex County Council strategy now. I know they've changed it, haven't they? They've lengthened their dates to 2050, I think now. It was going to be 2030, I can't remember, and I think they've changed it. Yeah, so I know that doesn't align or accord with ours. So what is the risk to this authority? Because we rely on Essex County Council and others to actually to deliver really. Otherwise, it's going to cost us. So, is that you? I don't know you.
That's Mr. Chapman is going to help us.
Okay,
with that.
Mr. Chapman.
Mr. Nick Chapman.
Yes. So what are the risks to the council, please?
Thank you, Chair. So broadly speaking, all districts across the county have differing dates of compliance with the climate targets. The challenge with being ahead of Essex County Council is that, as you are aware, they have a number of strategies which are cross-county, and subsequently those carbon reductions that will be generated by those cross-county measures will not effectively be implemented within Maldon until the date that Essex County Council intends. By us having a date that is in advance of that, we run the risk of making our life harder for ourselves, in effect, by having to go further in order to achieve the cuts and in order to achieve the carbon savings, to then subsequently get the benefit of Essex County Council's changes later on. So effectively, by being out of step, that is a challenge. Secondly, a lot of change is achieved by coordinated approach, so by working with our partners and with other authorities and Essex. If we are slightly out of step with that, it could increase our challenges to deliver those changes. So effectively, because we're slightly out of step, it may be slightly harder for us to deliver those changes ourselves, and obviously we do need to work in step with the county. We are looking at this. This is an audit recommendation that is subject to discussion, and it's something that we will be bringing back when we bring the climate action strategy back to members.
Yeah, it is. 30 years is a big difference, isn't it? 20 years, 30 to 50, 20 years is a huge difference. Okay, I'm a little bit concerned about that myself, but okay, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Spencer.
Thank you, Chair. Well, notwithstanding the issues just discussed, I'd like to offer my congratulations to the officer and the team concerned, because it's great to see substantial assurance on this very important area of work.
Isn't it? It is, and thank you. So can we agree the recommendation? Thank you. Right, that's item 7 complete. Officers, if you've finished your part of the meeting, then please feel free to leave. I won't say it again, just go when you're ready. Thank you. Item 8 is the review of corporate performance. Bye-bye, gentlemen. Thank you. Ah, you can't get out. So you're here forever. Thanks. Okay, so item 8 is review of corporate performance, presented by Ms. Hughes. Thank you.
So, this report covers performance against our corporate plan as of Q3, so October to December 2023. Section 3.1.1 of the report shows an overall delivery picture against each of our corporate priorities. It shows that as of December, all 6 priorities were either on track or on track with conditional elements. The data that informs this is then set out in Appendix 1 of your report, which is on pages 65 to 104 of your report packs. Members are invited to review and feedback on the corporate performance report and confirm assurance of effective performance management.
Thank you. The recommendations are 1, that members review the information as set out in the report and Appendix 1, with priority focus given to the strategic priority level performance, and 2, that members confirm they are assured through this review that corporate performance is being managed effectively. I so propose. Do I have a seconder? Anybody? I spotted Councillor Pratt first, thank you. So members, questions, comments? Councillor Stamp?
Yeah, this is where I'd seen the section 106 bit. You know, when I mentioned it previously,
Yeah.
This is where I'd seen it. So I do apologise. Page 68, it says recruitment of project officer to deliver section 106 capital projects for youth facilities. Is there, because this is quite late on some section 106 monies, that's going to possibly run out. I can't remember if it's 2025. I don't know if anybody can help me on that. I know I think it's the burning ones, Ron. Do you remember, Councillor Pratt? Do you remember? the Section 106 monies for like the skate park.
Ms Green can help
and
us.
the whatever. So is there a risk to the council because these projects may not be delivered because we've just recruited this project officer, please? That's the main one. Thanks.
Thank you, members. I can confirm that the project officer has been taken on and actually started this week, and has got a clear timetable of when these projects need to be delivered in order to reduce any risks of losing any funding. So that is the basis of the work. It's been prioritised in terms of ensuring that we are able to deliver within the timeframes.
Thank you. Come back.
Could I also at this stage then, being as we're discussing it, Madam Chair, that we strongly request that members are involved from the initial stages rather than the officers do whatever they feel they would like to do and then members get involved and there could maybe some issues after. This is a broken record. I say it all the time. You've heard me say it ever since I was elected. But I do think it's really important, especially when we've got a tight envelope and we haven't got an oven-ready scheme or whatever we called it at one of the meetings before.
Shovel ready?
That's them, shovel ready, whatever, one of those. But on a serious note, because I don't want that money to go back to the developers. It's got to go for the youth in Burnham on Crouch and wherever the other areas have got their Section 106 monies for. We've sat on this money for a long time and this council hasn't done anything. So can you reassure me, please?
I can reassure you, members, that not only will there be early engagement with members, there'll also be early engagement with our stakeholders and the youth as well.
Good, thank you. Councillor Burwood.
Sorry, just a late one. Declare an interest that I'm a Heybridge Parish Councillor as well. And Heybridge, especially West Heybridge, where I'm the ward member, has long been seen as an area which is really, really deficient in any sorts of activities for the youth. And I know that I, for one, and I know the Parish Council on the whole, would really like to be involved in anything that involves that project officer. So if my details, and especially maybe the details of our clerk at the Parish Council, be passed on to them as a really important link that we need to make within the district and especially that ward. Thank you.
Ms Green, we can do that?
Absolutely. Any of the ward members will all be involved in any of those communications.
Thank you. Councillor Stilts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Page 72. And I'm looking at the percentage of One Maldon District Multi-Agency Partnership Action Plan completed to timescales. Can you please explain to this committee why we have only reached 30% and yet we have way off of our target?
Who's going to do that, Mr Holmes?
Chairman, I don't think I'll be able to answer that for you this evening. I don't have a colleague from the department here this evening, so if it's permissible, I will get that answer to you in writing and share it with the committee.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Members, so, can we agree to recommend it? No, Councillor Sand.
No, sorry, Madam Chair, there's a big pack and I'll put lots of little bits highlighted.
I thought I detected a slowing down of
Okay,
action.
thank you. I'd like to ask the question about the local development plan review. It says here that work has, however, page 76, members, I do apologise. Work has, however, now been completed on the nature conservation study and employment land and premises study. Has this gone to the planning policy working group? Is this available for all members to actually review? I can see Matt ready to go. Look, he's ready, sitting there, ready. Yeah, thank you.
Just as soon as
and it also says growth options testing programme has now commenced, which will see the more detailed traffic modelling, environmental and infrastructure appraisals completed in order to inform the scale of growth that can be accommodated in the district from 2029. Now, I'm not aware of what was agreed on the traffic modelling. Was it the higher number or the lower level? My basic, because it was discussed last time I was around, it was discussed. But where is that being filtered down to all members of the council? Obviously, I'm not in this working group anymore, and I don't feel we're getting enough information coming back to members on the progress of this and also the priority of how it's going forward. So if Matt could answer that, I'd be appreciative, or point us in the direction so I can read these studies, because I'm very interested in this. Thank you.
Mr. Winslow, can you help us, please?
Yes, Chair, thank you. The two studies mentioned, the Nature Conservation Study, Employment Land Premises Study, yes, they have been back through the Planning Policy Working Group a couple of times in the duration of preparation. In terms of have they been published yet and are they available? The studies themselves. Sorry, I don't know if you can hear me.
Well, yes, we can.
I'm sorry, I can hear feedback. Sorry. The studies themselves haven't been sent out to all members, but once we actually have the written reports, then I think we can certainly make those available in the ModGov area or the SharePoint area for members to see. There's no that's not a problem at all. In terms of the traffic modelling and the sort of infrastructure testing, what we had discussed actually. We had discussed bookending, so testing various levels of growth as part of any of the infrastructure assessment modelling. That is traditionally done for local development plan production, rather than just pinning ourselves against one scale of growth. In terms of how that's being fed back to wider members, so the committee may be assured that the Planning Policy Working Group reports to Council, and a report is due to the next Council on the work that the Planning Policy Working Group has done over the course of the last since the last report, which I think was 9 months ago. So that's from the chair of the Planning Policy Working Group. That will be coming to next Council, where that can be debated, because that's the route in which Council gets updated about Planning Policy Working Group activities.
Thank you. Councillor Stan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm still concerned that members aren't, when you have minutes or information from whatever working group it is, I thought it was supposed to go on mod.gov or wherever so other members can access it. I put a fresh serve ticket in and somebody very kindly gave me the instructions because I couldn't find anything. And I've recently tried to, and it's taken me a few weeks to get information. I'll give you an example of this for the, is it car parking charges group? And I was very shocked to read, I think I got it yesterday, that the 4 members who sit on that, it took me a long time to be able to get that information. Now, I thought as elected members, we should be able to have access to whatever working groups, because otherwise I feel it's unfair. None of us are actually knowing what the heck is going on. And everybody on that parking group was all from the north. There was nobody from the south wards at all. Which does concern me, because it's obviously not very balanced, which is another matter, Madam Chair, but I'm making a point that the information is not being readily available, and I don't know if, I feel sorry for Mr Holmes, because he's here on his own and he doesn't have to take some stick, but it is important that everybody is easy to access information, and not just people on those working groups, because we're going to go back to what we had before. You'll go to council and you'll get things being refused.
Well, the Planning Policy Working Group report is on the agenda for S&R next week. Strategy and Resources.
I'm sure I'll be reading it, but my point is I may have wanted to read it in relation to ask questions at this meeting tonight.
Is it not on mod.gov?
I'll have to check, Chairman, if it is on mod.gov. I can't check from here. No.
Thank you. Next set of questions. Right, Councillor Burwood.
More a note with regards to items on page 78. Kicking the car and air quality. We're potentially losing our hospital. We're going to have more car journeys going across the district, and both of these are a complete waste of time then, in my opinion. I think it's scandalous what's happening potentially with our hospital, and it's going to be more car journeys, people travelling across the whole of the county and the whole of the district, and both of these are going to mean more car journeys and worse air quality.
Councillor Sills.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Whilst I agree completely with the car thing, and I was going to ask the same question, I'm looking at page 75, And I'm a little bit confused with page 75 because you're talking about the RAG being on track, and then you're talking about the Prom Park management plan has stalled. Well, if it's stalled, it's not on track. And then we're talking about our satisfaction of our parks, and I must admit, the satisfaction of poor Riverside Park is very low. And why is that? So you're talking about a gateway review. So, you know, what actually is going on here? Because if the Prom Park management plan has stalled because the gateway review, and can you please explain to members what the gateway review is, then surely it's not on track. And then can you explain also this resident satisfaction survey, because that doesn't seem to actually go in with anything you've got there, and there is a bit about transport on that page as well, so it's a bit of a mismatch of about 4 different things on that page, I would have thought.
Right, I'll just wait for Mr Holmes on that, but as a side note, the working group minutes are on mod.gov by default, I've just been told, but you do have to select that group in your settings. It doesn't automatically appear in your list unless you go through settings and forget. Ms Hughes says she can circulate a guide, which I think they have before. Mr Holmes, have you got something for us?
Yes. Chairman, with regard to the Prom Park management plan, I think we need to remember the context of this is Q3. So we're giving you an update as of Q3. Obviously, we're now into Q4, and there has been progress on the Prom Park management plan. A gateway review is looking at all the information and work that's been collected to date to understand if that is on track, if it's the direction we want the review to go on. So since this report was drafted, that gateway review has been held, and we're looking to refocus the work to give it the delivery. But in Q4, you'll get another update.
Thank you.
Slightly. Can you also explain why the resident satisfaction for the two parks are quite low, especially Riverside?
I've got Miss Hughes who'd like to explain. Please, Miss Hughes.
That data is based on the annual resident survey, so you can see it's pretty consistent sort of year on year. We do get, so that resident survey data will be updated because as of December, we obviously had a 23-24 version, so we'll see the latest picture in the next report. But also we do have open-ended comment box that goes with that question, so it does give us a bit of a picture about what people are feeding back on, and that's all included in the full analysis that's provided. So you will see an up-to-date reflection of that data and an up-to-date list of comments that people have provided that give a bit of an insight when that gets published shortly.
Thank you. Councillor Stamp.
Could I ask what the off-road cycling, what the cycling routes are going to be on page 78? I'd be very interested in my division of where, because normally it's often Maldon centric, so I'd like to know if somebody can give me that information or if I'm going to have to wait. And also an update on the digital steering group that met with Essex County Council, and I think it took place on the 7th of February. That would be interesting because I've always been trying to find out what's happening there. So have we got any more information on that, please?
Mr Holmes.
Not with me this evening. Apologies, but I will pick those questions up unless Mr. Winslow's just appeared on the screen. He might be able to help. Thank you.
Through you, Chair. So in terms of the cycle routes, we are. I don't have any specific details as to where they are or they are not, but just to assure members that we have been pushing the County Council to do a further all-member engagement workshop with Maldon members before they finalise the Maldon District Future Transport Strategy, which has a list of, or will have a list of priority projects of that nature in it. We're currently trying to arrange that as soon as possible with the County Council, so that you can see what those projects may or may not be and have your input on those. And that's just members might remember that there was an earlier engagement session in late 2022 And what that engagement session will also do is provide feedback on the consultation that the County Council ran last year.
Yes, come back.
I understand, Mr Winslow, that we have got an officer that's meeting with the County Council regarding this very subject, so I would have thought there would be something to report back about the cycling and the transport and everything. No? I thought we'd got an officer liaising with them.
So through you, Chair, yes, we do have one of the planning policy team that meets with the County Council to try to input from a professional side, but obviously what hasn't happened yet is for member input. That's what we've been pushing for, because it's not a Maldon District Council document which we have, or strategy that we have any control over. Hence why we have asked for Maldon District Council members to have a specific engagement workshop to help the prioritisation and identification of projects. That's what that officer has been doing.
Okay. Councillor Stilts and then Councillor Pratt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On page 76, and we're back to kicking the car habit. And, you know, if we're looking at a Maldon transport plan, I think we've got to be mindful that, you know, we are going to have people having to journey outside of the district for medical treatment once the hospital goes. So can we make sure that we're looking at how easy it would be for people to get to Broomfield, Brentwood and Braintree by transport?
Mr Winslow?
Through you, Chair. So I think members and officers, I think, can contribute those sorts of points into the next engagement session on the Maldon District Future Transport Strategy. So it's those sorts of feedback and local knowledge that members it would be valuable for members to contribute into when the workshop is held.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Pratt, sorry.
Thanks, Chair. I've jumped forward to page 90. I homed in on a greener future, but was quite surprised that the report says we have installed 0 charging points and only 35 trees. Is that the case? I'm sure at the dedication of the cemetery this year, we must have planted at least 30 or 40 trees. That's just on one afternoon, so I just questioned that report.
That's true. Well, this is Q3 again of the report, but so Ms Hughes.
Yeah, it is because of the quarter that it's in. Apparently, tree planting season is then the following quarter.
Yeah,
we did discuss this when we looked at the Q3 report, and we are expecting that number to go up in the next quarter because of when tree planting season is. The EV charging points, that is also correct. There have been charging points put in around the district. That was also raised when we looked at the data, but they haven't been necessarily ones that Maldon District Council has influenced that count as our delivery for up till Q3, so that's why that one's 0.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Good. I could just come back.
Yes,
something that's not contained in the report, but we've all received our little stickers on our black bins and had the piece of paper, and I was so surprised to read that it is estimated that 25% of our general waste that goes to landfill is food. And if you think about that, that means every 4th bin is full of food. And I struggle to believe that, because we religiously put all our food in the little grey bin, which goes in the green bin. We don't fill the little green bin in a week. No. So 25% across the district. See, I just wonder, is there a way of getting that report either confirmed, or it's not contained in here, because the recycling bit doesn't contain food?
Mr Holmes?
Chairman, yes, we will be able to do that, so I can ask for that information to be looked at to see where that figure has come from, and actually make sure it is relevant to the district, but I'm more than happy to do that.
Thank you.
The figures nationally are huge and horrifying, though, aren't they? I mean, it wouldn't be that surprising.
Yeah, nationally,
Just an
but
observation.
it actually mentions Maldon District.
It does.
And I don't believe it, but if it's
hope I
written
don't
down, it
believe
must
it.
be true.
Well, I hope I don't believe it. I hope it's a mistake, but you just never know. We'll find out for you, Councillor. Moving on, any further questions? Are you? Well, I'm happy to if you're ready to, members. Okay, agree with the recommendation. Thank you very much. So item 9 is review of corporate risk. That's quarter 3 again, and found on pages 105 to 112. So Ms Hughes will be presenting. And we have a whole bunch of recommendations on that, which I'll give you after the report.
Yeah, so this report reflects the corporate risk register for quarter 3. So that's October to December 2023. Section 3.3 of your covering report highlights risks that have changed since quarter 2. There's just one risk, and it's one that had a decrease in rating. That's risk 11, failure to protect commercially sensitive data. Appendix 1, which is found on pages 107 to 111 of your agenda pack, then gives the full view of the corporate risk register. And then additionally, you've got Appendix 2, page 112 of your pack, which shows associated mitigating actions for risks. Members are invited to review and challenge the information as set out and confirm assurance that corporate risk is being managed effectively.
Thank you. Right. Recommendation 1 is that members review the corporate risk register in Appendix 1 and provide comment and feedback for consideration. 2 is that members review progress of the corporate risk mitigating actions in Appendix 2 and provide comment and feedback for consideration. Recommendation 3 is members are assured through this review that corporate risk is being managed effectively, and 4 that members challenge risk where the committee feels the council's corporate goals may not be achieved. I so propose. So I have a seconder, please. Councillor Stills. So members. Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Spenceley, I wasn't looking your way.
Sorry,
I
Chair, no
apologise.
problem. So again, harping on about an issue which several of us have raised, are 5 issues associated with infrastructure. Recent developments with regards to the health infrastructure clearly put us in a much more vulnerable position. Our power in this is limited, as we know, but and I'm not suggesting we change the risk rating, but I can foresee that one being even more prominent than it is currently.
Ms Hughes, do you have a comment for that? Or?
So the risk scoring is reviewed by CLT every quarter, so they might want to take that on board when they do their next review of the scoring.
Thank you. And Mr Winslow, you've appeared on our screen, are you?
Yeah, sorry. So it's just to reinforce the point that this risk description is also about the damage to the council's reputation as opposed to the delivery of infrastructure as itself.
Thank you. Right, I had Councillor Stills.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is disappointing to see that so many of these at-risk ones have been here for so many years, and I think we brought them up on many committees. I just wanted to ask Mr Winslow, if I can, about R7, failure to maintain a 5-year housing supply. Is that really still at risk, seeing as you're saying that we've got a 6.3 years supply? So should that still be at risk?
It must always be a risk. It's just sometimes it's higher than others. Sorry, Mr Winslow, am I jumping in?
Yeah. So this has fallen in I believe in the sort of certainly last few years that I've been here, because obviously the risk rating went from 3.3 5 years up to 6.35 years. I might be getting it, but what I'm trying to say obviously is that the risk, that the published position has improved. In the last quarter though, it stayed the same, which is why the risk rating has remained unchanged. Obviously what we reflect here is that is this based on the likelihood has changed over the sort of trend. I think from my view, it is still worthwhile reflecting the fact that the impact on the district of not having a 5-year land supply is high, because obviously you can, as we've seen, it can make planning decisions in locations that are not allocated more likely to come forward or more likely to be approved, particularly on appeal, if there isn't a 5-year housing land supply. But in respect of the likelihood of this, given the review of the council's 5-year housing land supply methodology that was completed last year, and given that in the last published position, which was obviously Q1 of 23-24, it was recorded as being at 6.35 years. That's why it was felt that the likelihood could fall at some point in the last year. So I don't think there is. I think it is reasonable for it still to remain rated where it is. Obviously, if the position improves over and above 6.35 years, that may mean that the likelihood drops again, and it would move in its position in the table. But I think it's still, given the consequences of not having a 5-year housing land supply on the local planning authority and the district, I think that's why it's still, from our professional point of view, still needs to be rated a 5, which would mean it always features near the middle to the top of the risk table.
Thank you. Councillor Stamp.
Could I ask Mr Winslow, while he's on our screen, to possibly explain the government's recent change to not be so, what's the word? Not restricted, so severe, I can't think of the word, forgive me, on the 5-year land supply. I thought that allowed it to go down to 4 years in certain circumstances. Can you just refresh us exactly what that means? Because if that applies to us, Mr Winslow, that risk could be slightly lower?
So it doesn't apply to us because it's for local authorities that have had a local plan adopted in a more recent time. So the government changed that if you'd had a local plan approved within a certain amount of years, and forgive me off the top of my head, I can't remember what it is, but I can get that out as an answer in a bit more detail to the committee. If those circumstances were met, a lesser, a shorter land supply or lesser land supply was tolerable. But it's not the position for Maldon District Council.
I was trying to help you there, you know. Could I actually ask my question?
Yeah.
Mine's more about the R5 and obviously not to go over the old ground about the Section 106 agreements. Mine is more about the triggers. I was just wondering if is there a policy or a process what says that when a development gets to a certain number of houses being built? Because I'm trying to find the information that says when you get to 50 houses, you deliver that, no matter what site it is. So is there a strategic policy across the council that says no matter what the developer is, no matter what the development is, when it gets to 50, we know we're going to get a percentage of that Section 106 money coming in at that stage? The reason I'm asking that is to also safeguard us from most probably non-delivery of sites if they get into financial difficulties. Thank you.
Mr Winslow?
So there is not a council policy on when the triggers for universally for developments, because all Section 106 agreements are subject to negotiation, but they would be informed by the various infrastructure providers indicating when those contributions are needed based on the burden, or if it's housing, for example, based on the burden of the completion of a certain amount of units coming forward. But there's not a policy. It's more a negotiated practice with infrastructure providers.
Thank you. Yes.
Do you think there is a need that Maldon could be a little bit tougher then on negotiations, so we can actually get the infrastructure money in sooner on that development to try and mitigate the harm that is often, we all know we've reached our limit for infrastructure out here now. Everybody knows, it's no big secret. So if we're going to get more housing, surely if we could be a little bit more robust in our negotiations with developers, I don't understand it, I don't profess to understand it, but I'm actually asking, is there a possibility that we can be more robust or develop a policy in the LDP that actually works for the council and the residents rather than from a developer?
Through you, Chair. In terms of the specifics of policy, it was something which we were looking at as having a planning obligation supplementary planning document that would support the local development plan once it's reviewed, to stipulate more of the local terms by which planning obligations were negotiated, or planning obligations, including Section 106 agreements, were negotiated. And that's in the that was in the local development scheme as part of the programme that would support the local development plan. In terms of whether we're being robust enough, I believe from the practice that we have been employing that we have, obviously Section 106, we don't have the freedoms to just, and I know the councillor is not asking this, but we don't have the freedoms to just charge what we feel is necessary as a local planning authority, and that is informed by the viability assessment which goes alongside development submissions, and that will inform when the trigger points should be and when they can be afforded as part of schemes. But I do, if there is anything which we're missing a trick on, from a practice perspective, we're quite happy to look at whether or not there's any other things that other local authorities do that we're not doing, and see whether or not we can integrate that within our practice, and quite happy to take that away as an action.
Councillor Bassinger.
Thank you, Chair. Mr Winslow, so on the 106, each case is then negotiated individually. So the triggers are also negotiated individually. Is that how it works? So can you set triggers for each case, or is there some sort of joined up thinking, or is it just, or do we set the triggers as we feel the case requires it? I mean, how does it work? So.
The triggers are really set based on the scheme and what type of infrastructure is actually, type of infrastructure payments, because obviously triggers tends to be in respect of payments, but Section 106 can also not necessarily require us to seek contributions. It can also be developers providing things on site on their own. There isn't a universal approach to triggers, but they would typically be set based on when, as you're probably aware, when properties are reach a status in which they can become occupied, and therefore the burden fall to the local area. It would be based on the negotiation with all of those various infrastructure providers as to when those triggers should be. But as I said, if members would prefer further assurance to determine if there is anything else that Maldon District Council isn't doing that other local authorities are doing, that's an action that we can take away and have a little bit of a look at.
Thank you. Councillor Bassinger.
Just another one. Do we actually scope to see if developers are viable enough when they begin a development to actually meet the triggers that we set?
Mr Winslow.
Just to clarify, because there was a bit quiet.
Oh, sorry.
Did we check whether?
Do we scope to see if do we scope the developers to see that they have the funds to actually meet the triggers?
So there is, as part of the viability assessment of developments, they are based on an open book process that's governed by procedures and policies that are set out by the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, who obviously help to determine how different types of infrastructure and construction can be funded and etc. They do have to present that information, and that can, when we are checking when we are checking viability assessments, or we can get that independently verified as to whether or not what they're claiming they can and cannot afford is true or not, or is reasonable or not. What's important to say, however, is that some developments can depend on cash flow in the scheme, and it's not necessarily how much is in the bank of the developer at the point of the planning application, because some of these planning applications might not be built out for 5 or 6 years. So that's looked at as part of the viability assumptions within development.
Councillor Burwood.
I would also be very interested in the triggers that relate to Essex County Council with the building of things like schools. There was a school due to be built on an estate, again in Heybridge, 20 odd years ago, that never came about, and eventually the land was sold for more housing. And I'm very conscious that there is a school planned to be built in Heybridge, which again is down to Essex County Council to say, yes, we want it now. So how do those triggers work? Because under current thinking, the Essex County Council have indicated to the developers they're not likely to build it until 2032 at the earliest, which is 8 years away, and I can't imagine that development's going to take 8 years to build. So I'm concerned that it's going to be forgotten about and we'll get more houses instead.
Mr. Winslow?
So obviously the county council do accrue Section 106 agreement money themselves, as well as part of development. We monitor Section 106 and the triggering payments just to make sure that the legal agreements are paying on time when triggers are hit, that's scrutinised as part comes to this committee in terms of the Section 106 update reports, and it's something that relatively recently the internal auditor has also reviewed our process for to determine that we're being as robust as possible in terms of determining whether or not the trigger payments are being paid when they are due.
Thank you. Can we get back to the actual risk register, please? We've gone down a planning line, which is very interesting, so I was happy to let you, but I think we need to keep on track as far as we can. Councillor Stills.
Thank you, and I am going to let Mr. Winslow have a break now. Page 110, R2, and it's failure to target services and influence partners with the aim of having an effective outcome on the identified health and well-being needs of the vulnerable population. Are we taking into account on that risk register the closure of the hospital?
Mr. Holmes.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I was going to ask Chair permission to think about the question that Councillor Stamp and other members raised around R5, actually R2, where you'll see the influence of the closure potentially, or the alteration to the hospital at St Peter's. Bear in mind again, though, this is at Q3, so as was explained, there will be another review of this. So if there are any comments, it was more likely to impact at R2 than R5.
Councillor Stamp, then Councillor Spenceley.
Yeah, mine's a thank you, because I attended ONS last week. This is R4, failure to influence community safety, partners, and that ONS meeting was really good about crime. The police was here, and so was Adam Pipe about the speeding. So I would actually just like to say well done to ONS and Mr. Holmes, because he was present at that one. So it's good for you this time, Mr. Holmes. We're actually praising you rather than criticising. And it was a very good meeting, and I felt sorry for the new chief inspector or whatever his name was, but he didn't do too badly. So thank you everybody who participated in that meeting, because I do think we are trying to address it and our community partners are working well together. So that's a tick. Thank you.
Councillor Spenceley.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I was going to refer to R2 as well, in particular relationships with the Mid-Essex Alliance. But I think R5 can be relevant in that there's a perception out there that our reputation is on the line as well as the NHS. And I think in terms of message handling, we need to be quite kind of adroit in how we get the message out there that we have certain responsibilities, but also significant limitations on what we can do.
Thank you. Any more questions on this item? Members, one thing I've been asked to say, if members can, where possible, bring more detailed questions to officers before the meeting, that would be enormously helpful, not least because then members of the public watching now would get the answers as well as members of the committee later, presumably by email, but by some other means that the public doesn't have instant access to.
Madam Chair, can I say, yeah, with all due respect, I mean, I didn't even manage to get to look at this agenda for 5 hours till today. Some of us diaries are really heavy with huge agendas, so whilst I will apologise for not doing that, sometimes I don't think of them until later or even in the car coming here.
I appreciate that. I did say where possible, but it would be helpful to members of the public to hear the answers here and now, I thought. So can we agree the recommendation on that, on the risk register? Thank you. Right, item 10 is the balanced scorecard exception, and that's Ms Hughes again. Lucky Ms Hughes.
So the senior management team regularly review service performance, and they use this to inform their management approaches within the organisation. This report covers July to December 2023 and the exceptions and areas of both under and over performance from that data. Section 3.3 shows a table of underperforming areas, and that's found on pages 114 to 116 of your agenda pack. And section 3.4 highlights areas of overperformance, and that's found on page 117 of your agenda pack. There's also section 3.5, which is on page 118 of your agenda pack, which shows indicators that aren't currently in exception, but they've been marked for closer monitoring. And then the further performance detail is set out in Appendix 1, which is page 121 to 136 of your agenda pack for members to note. Members are invited to review this information and confirm assurance that service performance is being managed appropriately.
Thank you very much. 3 recommendations on this: that the committee review and comment on exceptions to service reporting provided in this report. Number 2, that members note the additional performance in Appendix 1. Number 3, that members confirm they are assured through this review that operational performance is being managed effectively. I so propose. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Pratt, thank you very much. So, members. Councillor Stamp.
Yeah. Can I have a little bit more information on across the first one? It says 3 out of the 12 areas, non-compliance twice in a 6-monthly period. I would imagine, knowing the teams, that there was some mitigating circumstances. Are we allowed to know why that was it wasn't managed to adhere to it or keep to the high standards they generally have, please?
Ms Green, thank you.
Thank you, members. So I can clarify, this is the monthly summary we do at the end of the month, which goes to our corporate leadership team just to give an overview of performance. So that's the reports that weren't done. It's the end of month. It wasn't that performance isn't being monitored, it's the summary report at the end of the month that wasn't submitted to CLT. So the reason for this was simply resources. At the time, we didn't have a manager within our community engagement and customers team, and we had also the revenues and benefits service had recently moved over to another team as well as part of the restructure. So it was sort of very early on in the process, and we are now making sure that those reports are just done monthly. But as I say, just to give reassurance to members that the performance is monitored every month and is being scrutinised by the team. It's just that the end of month report didn't get submitted.
Thank you.
Thank you. I knew there'd be something, and it's important that when it's documented, it doesn't look very good. So an explanation would be good to accompany the actual reasons for it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Stills.
Yes, thank you. Page 115, and this may be Mr. Geller that answers it. We're talking about the homeless situation, and it says outward London mitigation placements. And I don't know if you've seen the thing from the MP at Southend complaining about London authorities putting homeless people in their accommodations without telling them. Is that part of this problem that we've got on here?
Mr. Gaylor, can you help us?
Thank you. Yes, I can confirm it's not a big problem for Maldon. London councils do tend to place more towards South Essex because that tends to be more affordable. But we are starting to see outward migration from some council areas, and it's really just what they do is they just look around and they see where the nearest affordable property is that they can discharge a duty to. They will then make that placement. They should be informing councils when they place within our area, but quite often that doesn't happen, and then it becomes a case of us picking that person up and becoming aware of that person and then linking back to the council to get the information.
Can I ask, and I know this is going slightly off of that, how much of a more of a I'm just trying to think of the word. Basically, how much more pressure is that putting on you, and how much is that costing us as an authority?
I'm not able to really put a cost on it because we don't know the true numbers. What tends to happen is they will take up, if you like, private rented accommodation that we would typically go to. Because councils close to London can afford to pay higher rates, they will typically access rental markets that they feel are affordable. So when we typically go to access those properties or contact the landlords, we'll find that the unit's gone or the price is too affordable because they're really being paid for by councils that can afford a bit more. So that's.
Okay. Councillor Stan.
Can I ask, is there nothing we can do as an authority? Because that means then we're never going to be able to look after our residents within the district. So we're always going to be build to accommodate I'm going to say Tom, Dick and Harry. Everybody from outside the area.
I must be honest, it's a tactic that a lot of councils, a lot of housing authorities are using. We use it. We place out of districts where we find affordable properties. We do try and notify councils that we've placed in their area, but it's simply a case of finding the most affordable stock, the most appropriate stock as close as we can. And we know that London councils, there's high population density. They've got no choice but to look outside because the affordability and the housing resource isn't there, and that's now started to become problems in other councils, and so they're then looking further out as well.
Sorry, I've got Mr. Holmes starting to come in.
Just to acknowledge that at Chief Executive level in Essex, that is being picked up as an issue around cross-border notification, certainly with regard to London Borough. So I know those Chief Executive groups are looking at that and trying to establish a protocol. It won't stop it happening, but it should perhaps stop it happening without notice. So it's a national problem. It happens all over the country. It happens in Essex. So, but yes, it is something that Chief Executive are looking at as well.
Thank you. Councillor Stan.
Yeah, I'm interested in page 116 about the sickness, long-term sick, etc., etc. Has it got any better? I can see by the small amounts here, but we have had issues in the past about long-term sick and sick days. Has it not picked up substantially to the pre-COVID times? And do you feel, I've got to be careful here, do you feel that working from home and rather than in a team environment, as in the office, can and does have a detrimental effect? Please don't be biased, because we know some people don't want to come back in the office, and I'd actually ask for an honest opinion, because I think statistics now are starting to come out that people do want to actually work in a team together and go back to working in offices.
Right, that's one for Ms. Cardy, please.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, the figures are improving. So you will see an improvement in Q4 when those published figures come out. There is a lot of debating around whether sickness increases or decreases. Evidentially, sickness does seem to decrease over organisations when there is hybrid and flexible working in place. What we have found is that the figures were unnaturally deflated in COVID because COVID wasn't recorded as a sickness, and that was a national policy. And then when the lockdowns finished and the country opened up, then a lot of people, there was a lot of cross sickness, obviously because we had been all in our own homes and quite immune from just the normal colds and things. So we did, and organisationally, a lot of organisations found that had increased after COVID. So we did have that bump, and now we're actually beginning to reduce as well now. But there is a lot of work going on in the background. We have a lot of employee support in place with employment assistance program, mental health advisors to really assist staff in getting back to work. And there is a bit of short-term sickness through a lot of the normal colds and winter colds. We do find at the moment that actually not being in the office means that we're not passing that on to each other in normal circumstances. So it is, part of robust planning in that it does help in that we're not mixing as much all of the time to have, a lot of flu pandemics ended up spreading quite quickly. So it's a muddy picture, but we're doing a lot of work supporting and monitoring staff to ensure that they're in work. So on a average scale across most councils, I think a target of 8 is a very good statistic that we're adhering to, and we're almost back down to 8. I think we're 8.12 in Q3, so we are doing well, and we will increase that support. But I do think on a national average, we're better than average.
Councillor Stamp.
Yeah, thank you. Just to come back, have you noticed there's an increase in our team, our staff having mental health issues and actually looking to get support and help? And the second part is, I understand that if you're not coming to the office about mixing with and getting colds and flus, but the knock-on effect of that is it actually does reduce. I sound like what you call him from the public health man, don't I now? It does actually reduce our resistance, and then when you start to get something, you get it far worse because you're not mixing. Like when we used to, at kiddies, you used to eat mud and go out and play, didn't you? Whereas now you don't do anything like that, and your resistance get low. Well, it's true. Yeah, well, we did up north. We were poor.
Mud myself. Yeah, Mr. Holmes.
Mental health, please, if somebody can answer on the mental health.
Perhaps I can, yes, could Ms Cardy comment on mental health, then I've got another comment I'd like to make if I can, please.
On the mental health question, I think we do have peaks and troughs of this, and I do think it's hard to measure overall. There was an increase in COVID and post-COVID, but again, it's being managed really effectively. We're supporting the staff very well, and we've had a lot of cases where we've got longer term sick, not necessarily for just mental health, but also for personal reasons where there's like long-term illnesses and things, where we've actually managed to get people back into work really quickly, often on a phased return, which really helps support our staff, but also helps the business in getting our staff back in work.
Thank you. Mr. Holmes.
Thank you. Yes, and I think you asked a question around hybrid working, and I think a couple of things to say around that. One is that the council has always maintained office accommodation and space, even through COVID, where possible, and where the law allowed for people to come and work, and that has never changed. I was in the office myself this week, in a very busy office, and it looked like old days, really, in terms of a number of staff working together. So a lot of teams do take the opportunity to come in on a cyclical basis. A lot of staff come in all of the time as well, and that is probably what you'd expect in any organisation. I think the other thing is later this month we'll be able to share the staff survey with you, and some questions in there about hybrid working, and it's generally positive. The staff of this authority value the ability to work in a hybrid way. When it's appropriate to come in, they're here. When it's more appropriate to work from home, they will do so. So I think some of that sort of you'll hear straight from the staff in the staff survey.
If I can come back finally, well, that's good, but you've just answered my question. There's more staff working in the office and the sick levels have gone down. So there is a correlation, most probably a correlation for that. Sorry, you don't need to come back on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Pratt.
I'm going to caveat this with an apology to you, Chair, because you said I should have asked this question beforehand, but unfortunately,
Should I said where possible?
yeah, I only read the papers this afternoon, and I have great difficulty in understanding Appendix 1, and I just wonder whether we could ask an officer to give some explanation, because it appears to me that we base our performance purely on application decisions that are delegated.
We're not on that yet.
I thought we were.
No, next one, nearly there, Ron.
Oh, I beg your pardon, I've leapt forward.
Next one.
You have.
We're not on that.
Oh, I'm sorry, shut up.
Recommendation.
Item 10, can we agree the recommendation? Right. Item 11 is review of health and safety. That's what I've got. If you're still on the balanced scorecard exception, Councillor Pratt, you are in fact right.
It says on page 113, number 2, the members note the additional performance in Appendix 1.
Yes.
Sorry if I...
So I think you were right in the first
I
place.
just need to, when I read it, I thought, why is our performance measured on decision? Because I put my mic back on. I believe, are we now...
Yeah.
Am I able to ask the question?
We did agree the recommendation, but since what you want is an
Only
explanation,
because
I'm going to apologise to Mr.
down, supported
Baccarini,
by the chair,
who is doing exactly what he was supposed to do, but we're in a muddle over here. And ask Mr. Winslow to come in and answer your question.
Well, if I could just finish my question that I was stopped from asking, why is our performance measured only on delegation? Because I am a firm believer that committees make as good a decisions as delegated decisions.
Didn't think they were, but Mr. Winslow, perhaps you can help us out here.
I think he's disappeared.
Has he
off
gone?
the screen, Chairman. Yes.
Yes, he seems to
no,
have...
he's
no,
back.
he's there.
He's back.
He's there, Mr. Winslow. Did you hear the question, Mr. Winslow?
Sorry, Chair, I didn't hear the question. I've been having some IT difficulties myself today.
Sorry, Councillor Pratt, could you repeat the question about why do we only count
On
delegated...
Appendix 1, and it's planning performance report for quarters 2 and quarters 3 for 23-24. It's purely on planning, and it lists from Brentwood through to Harlow a performance rating based on application decisions delegated. And I'm asking why this is a performance factor only on delegated decisions, because I believe that committee decisions are as robust as delegated decisions. So why is this a performance factor?
So the performance report in the appendix is the government performance report. So the measures are limited to what the government asks us to report on. That's not to say that what you're talking about isn't relevant from an internal performance perspective, but these are what are called delta returns, which are the national performance monitoring standard.
So there you go. It wouldn't be a benchmark if we didn't do what the others do, which is what the government tells us.
So if I could come back,
Fair
because
point.
the PS1 delta puts Maldon at the very bottom of the pile of those reported. Now, is that something we should be striving to improve? Because to improve it means that we must delegate even more of our decisions. And I noticed that there are some authorities, like Brentwood, that 100% of their decisions are delegated, so nothing goes to committee. And I would not support that as a local member, to say that all decisions of planning are delegated.
Mr. Winslow.
I think the councillor's statement is. I hear it. So in terms of where Maldon features, it's just giving you a ranking based on where we were performing in that quarter. Obviously, there's a full year report that will come at the end as well, which will have everything aggregated together. This is really just where the government are looking at our performance on. So I don't think I can really comment on whether things should be delegated or not. I respect the fact that the local planning authority is an elected body, but these are just the returns that we have to submit to government.
We have always been low. It's an awful lot higher than it was. Now, I'm not sure which of you ladies was first. I think Okay, Councillor Stilson, please.
Sorry, I must admit, I was like Councillor Stamp, thinking this was a different agenda item. But page 132, I just wanted to ask, the percentage of applications granted fell in Q3, and the same with the percent of applications decided on time. Now, is that because we had less applications coming through, or is that another reason? That's PS2 Delta Maldon, and it's page 132 if you look at the graph.
I'm afraid I don't have the reason. I can't give the committee the reason why that particular performance correlation happened. But I'm quite happy to come back to the committee with the view of the head of development management and building control to provide more insight on that performance measure.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Stamp.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to admit I got absolutely lost with all this. And I don't think I'm that daft, really. I know I can sometimes be a little bit daft. But I was looking at this, and it's just a maze of figures and things all over the place. Surely it would be far easier if it could be written in a I don't know, a spreadsheet, a table form or something. I presume by saying that what Mr. Winslow said, do we have to report it this way in this format, which is goodness knows how many pages, when all I would want to see is year on year or quarter on quarter, rather than so you've got something to go by. And what I've got, I always carry things around. You know, I'm a paper person. I've got the one from the 2022 calendar of appeals, and I don't know if it's the same sort of thing, but it's far easier for me to understand how this committee used to report things. So question one is, have we changed the way we report them? 2, why have we changed it? And 3, can we not make it a little bit easier for some of us to understand? Because there is a lot of information and pretty lines, and I've said this before, eyesights and looking at colours is not always easy. Figures, to me, are easy to digest and understand.
Mr. Winslow.
So I would also have to call on Mrs. Hughes to possibly contribute to part of this answer, because the way this is presented in the report is just lifted from our government returns.
Okay.
But I don't know if Mrs. Hughes has got any particular comments on Councillor Stamp's question.
I've just found that at the end, thank you to Councillor Stilts, it is at the end on Appendix 1, page 135, easier to understand, but do we have to have all this? Thank you.
No, we don't. The reason that this is reported to the committee is based on a previous request from the committee for more drill down on the planning data. But we can look at simplifying it, and the way that it's presented going forwards, we don't have to present all of it.
Madam Chair, could we actually have it in that table form, though? If to ask other members, it's just easier for me personally to look at data written down rather than to have squiggly lines going up and down and a thing going across there. It's maybe my age, but I don't really know, but I do struggle.
I'm older than you are.
Do you understand it? I don't, and I would much sooner have this on page 135. But again, you know, if in previous committees there's been a request for all this information to be given to us, I think it's for us now to say that perhaps we could revert to the old way, possibly, and maybe be better for us all, if that's okay.
Yeah.
If we all agreed on that.
Well, I'm happy to take that and review it with the chairman, because obviously I'm the vice chairman. But it was agreed
seems to be
by
the general
members, and I
consensus
seem to
that,
remember it being.
Just a simpler form of reporting would probably be more
Well,
helpful.
we seem to have both, but yes, as I
Yeah,
say, happy
exactly,
to take that away and review it, but
and
with
I'm
the
sure
chairman.
it'd be less work for the officers
And
as
the
well,
officers.
which we all appreciate. But for us, it's a tad confusing. That's all.
Right.
I think
Just
that's
make a little
generally what we're
note.
trying to say. It is, yeah. But do, you know, thank you for all that work. It's not that we don't appreciate it.
It is a lot of
We've
work.
just made a bit of a mistake. We've got a little too much.
Well, maybe we don't need to include the government, but
Thank you, Chair.
you know, I wonder how long it will be before the committee asks for more detail again. So are we actually done with item 10 now, members? Yes. Well, we did agree the recommendation, but since that was a question, that we came back to that. So now we have Mr. Baccarini and a review of health and safety of Q3. Thank you, Mr. Baccarini. Sorry to hold you up there.
Thank you, Chair. No problem. So I present the corporate health and safety performance for Q3, 1st of October to 31st December. Starting on page 137, the recommendations are that members consider the accident and incident statistics and reports of unacceptable behaviour that have been reported, and that they consider the progress being made in key health and safety themes. Before I start with the accident and incidents reporting in section 3.1.1, I'd like to inform members of an error in the first table. The entry on row 2, classified as an incident, has been reported elsewhere as a near miss. This incident entry will be deleted in the definitive committee report, and the near miss shall remain. Continuing in this section, of the accidents and incidents reported, there were 3 over this period, with 1 entry of significant potential reported and investigated by a leisure contractor. On the first table of page 138, there are 2 near misses and 6 hazard reports shown, with 1 hazard associated with a council contractor. Of the incidents of unacceptable behaviour, in the third table in section 3.1.1, there were 5 reports, 2 of which were experienced in person. Of these, 1 was reported post-incident to the police by our waste contractor, and another concerning a staff member required police and officer assistance at the time. There was no injury or physical contact, however, the officer felt that the encounter could escalate. Moving on to section 3.2, page 139, and in the table 3.2.1, which contains health and safety actions. There has been steady progress for many of the items listed, although there's been nothing significant to report in terms of things coming to fruition within this period. On page 140, and for section 3.3, health and safety groups, I'm pleased to report that the inaugural health and safety managers meeting has been scheduled, and the safety action team, which is for frontline staff, has been finalised after receiving nominations from managers. For item 3.5, system resources, reference is made to the draft system for reporting unacceptable behaviour. This is one such area where work is progressing. Officers obviously wish to proceed carefully with this, and this is to ensure that any future system, the data is held securely, but the relevant information is available to officers to allow them to assess risk. For example, if they're undertaking particular visits or there's a particular customer interaction. For item 3.10 on page 141, training, it's fair to say that the bulk of the progress has been in this area, and that's improving training and competence. The winter months are often quiet for a number of the teams, and this allows attendance of various training sessions. Selected staff have been trained to conduct more in-depth risk assessments on the use of display screen equipment. Maintenance and facilities teams have received training on electrical safety and isolation, whilst various service delivery teams have been face-fit tested for respiratory protection and trained on hazards associated with dust and fumes. Toolbox talks to various teams continue with a monthly presentation or discussion on a safety-related topic ongoing. Managers and supervisors are actively encouraged to lead some of these topics. Corporately, and more recently, over 70 staff were trained on dealing with violence and aggression, with some positive feedback we received on the practical nature of these sessions. Finally, looking at section 3.11, the levels and accidents and incidents and hazard and near-miss reporting, they remain low and perhaps too low to pick out any consistent trends. Priorities going forward, in section 3.12 on page 142, are as per the previous report, and for the benefit of members, this is work on unacceptable behaviour, loan working and contractor control. And of course, in amongst this, it will be embedding health and safety activities within the departments to make them responsible and accountable for their own health and safety. That's my report. If there's any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Baccarini, who actually already read out the recommendations. So as you've already heard them, I will just propose that we accept those recommendations, seconded by Councillor Spenceley. So any questions, members? So Councillor Stamp is pointing at Councillor Stilts, so I'll let Councillor Stilts go first.
I've only got one question. Mr. Holmes would expect me to bring this one up.
It's not chemical.
No, it's not. Page 138, at the very top, you talk about a hazard for the first aid boxes in maintenance depot workshop, unsealed, unclear if contents is missing. Under the health and safety first aid certification, all first aid boxes must be checked on a regular basis. Okay, having sealed ones, but are the stuff in it in date? So surely, if we are checking our first aid boxes on a regular basis to make sure that they are got the correct equipment in them and they are in date, we should know if anything has gone missing out of them.
Mr. Baccarini?
Yes, I can respond to that. The particular first aid kit concerned, it's normally best practice to have a contents list. The particular kit didn't have a contents list, and whilst it looked complete, the comment was made that it wasn't possible to tell simply if something had been taken. I would point out that there were appropriate and sealed and complete first aid kits on that site. It's just that one was provided in the workshop near to, obviously, where there's hazardous equipment, and that is what this comment relates to.
Thank you. Yes,
I will come back and say hopefully that first aid kit has been got rid of then, and we are making sure that we do make sure all our others have got a list of contents and whether those contents are in date.
Let's hope so. Councillor Stamp.
Yeah, I'm interested in, whenever I do training, you do a feedback form. So all this training sounds wonderful, which is great. Everybody needs it. I love going on training sessions and courses. So are you actually getting all the staff that are receiving training? Because I picked up on one, like I said, aggression training, that you had some positive feedback on it. Does that mean you had some negative feedback on it? And if you did, what steps have you taken to deal with any negative or improvements or learning from the training sessions? Because we can all learn how to do things better or in maybe a different way. Thank you.
Mr. Baccarini.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I didn't receive any negative comments directly with regards to that training, but I had heard that a member of staff found it particularly shocking because of its practical nature. There was fair warning given on 3 occasions as to its content, but because of that report on one of the sessions, a decision was taken to monitor that and issue forms. And I think for future reference, the only thing we will change is we will offer 2 different types of training on violence and aggression, a light version for staff that perhaps are not so frontline, and a full session for staff that are, for example, doing enforcement activity. So it was predominantly positive, but the comment we had where someone found it shocking, it did trigger us to issue forms subsequently for that particular training.
Councillor Stamp.
Yep. So can I ask again, do we actually do that as a matter of course, ask for feedback on training? Because whenever I attend a training session, they ask for feedback on training.
Chairman, yes, generally we do that as a matter of course. That's right. Mr. Baccarini indicated in this particular case, we acted almost midway through that course because I think there were 4 sessions, over 120 staff. As we got picked up in those feedback sessions, we made those changes. So it is useful to do.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Chairman.
Sorry, Ms Green, sorry, I
Yes,
apologise.
yes, and I think the other learning point we had was when the course was arranged, there was the details of the course was circulated to managers to make them aware of the content of the course and the nature of the course, and to bring to their attention that it was going to be a very practical course. Almost. So it was incumbent on managers to make sure that the staff they were putting forward, it was appropriate training for them. And so I think as well as staff experience, it picked up as us as managers need to take responsibility for the exact courses that we are putting our staff on to make sure it's entirely appropriate. So again, it's a good learning point from that.
Thank you. Okay, members, can we agree the recommendations? Agreed. Item 11. So item 12 is independent person for the PG&A committee. That's been presented by Ms Hughes. Thanks, and thank you, Mr Baccarini.
In July 2023, the Council received a suggested action plan for improvement as part of the finance peer review, and within this there was a recommendation for an independent person to be appointed to this committee. The detail in this report has been reviewed at the working group of PGA, who agreed to put this forward to committee for further consideration. Many local authorities include independent persons on their audit committees or similar, as this is seen as strengthening internal control and governance of the authority. Section 3.5 of the report highlights the suggested benefits of an independent person being appointed to the committee. It's worth noting that SIPFA encourages an independent person as best practice, and that could also become a requirement in the future. The paper highlights the suggested remuneration of around £700 per annum, and Appendix 1 to the report gives a suggested person specification to give members further information about how this would work operationally. Given the recommendations in this paper would lead to a constitutional change, the paper provides a recommendation to go forwards for Council for committee's consideration.
Thank you. So yes, I chaired the working group and we all agreed that this would be a good thing to put forward. So the recommendations are to the Council. 1, that committee recommend the Council to the Council the principle of co-opting an independent person onto the joint audit and governance committees on a non-voting basis. And 2, the committee approves the person specification attached at Appendix 1. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Pratt, I think, was quickest off the mark there. So, questions? Councillor Stamp.
Just to correct, it was me who suggested this when I was chair of PG&A. It was suggested again, but I suggested this because when I went up and down to the meetings, it was common practice. So yes. I think you'll find that I suggested it, not to, but I did suggest it, and it's taken a long time for it to come to fruition because we should have done this a long time ago.
Yes, I think it's a good idea to do it before it becomes compulsory, if indeed it does. So, anyone else? Do we agree with the recommendations? Thank you very much. Item 13 is committee self-assessment review. So again, that's Ms Hughes.
Yeah, so similar to the previous agenda item, the reason this item is coming forward is from the finance peer review, as it was a suggested action. Section 3.3 of the covering report highlights the wording of how this was suggested, and section 3.4 of the covering report also highlights the officer response that was given as part of the council paper. The PGA working group have reviewed this matter and the suggested tool that could be used for such a review, and that's linked in section 3.6 of the covering report. The report, further to working group feedback, recommends that a self-assessment is completed. If committee members are inclined to accept this, it's requested that members are appointed to complete the assessment, or that this is then delegated to the PGA working group.
Thank you. So the recommendations are, and I'll read them together but take them separately, that the Performance Governance and Audit Committee complete and report a self-assessment using a tool such as referenced in paragraph 3.5, and 2, that members are appointed to complete this activity, or it is confirmed the assessment should take place at a Performance Governance and Audit working group meeting. So on recommendation 1, can we agree the recommendation? And item 2, we need an actual decision. Should we appoint people or should we delegate that to the working group? Sorry, Miss Bird.
So just to advise, in respect to recommendation 1, the paragraph referenced in should actually be paragraph 3.6, not 3.5, just to clarify.
So it is. Thank you very much for that. So members, working group or what? Councillor Stamp.
Can I have a bit of clarity, because I must be getting late. So is this for everybody to do this?
Well, it's for the committee to do it, and we're looking at who to do it, to appoint specific people or delegate it to the working group, which we've already appointed.
Chairman, I would suggest that we send it to the working group and it's done now, because we're not going to do it as individuals. Well,
I maybe think that it might be good to actually work with the chairpeople of S&R and O&S as well. So, because one of the areas of concern I had when I was in the chair was that the committees don't always work cohesively together, and this would surely be an opportunity, or am I missing the point of this report? At least you're honest.
This is about... It's about self-assessment on audit, I'm not sure.
As I understand it, this is purely going back to the old days when we used to have an audit committee, and it wasn't part of PG&A. It was just the audit committee would review itself that we're doing it properly.
Yes.
I assume that the working group can look at the whole thing and come back with a recommendation to this committee.
That's what this is driving at. Well, we did have a proposal that we should delegate to the working group. That was proposed by Councillor Pratt, seconded by Councillor Bassinger. So, can we vote on that proposal? Okay, and that was thank you for that. That was seconded by Councillor Bassinger. Those in favour? Yeah. Okay. Was anyone against? Because I didn't see every hand go up. Was anyone against? No. That. I still think it could be for my various reasons. Well, the working group might look at that. But can I say that was unanimous, or are you abstaining, Ms. Councillor Stamp?
I'm going to abstain because I have reservations.
Okay. So that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in favour. Councillor Stamp is abstaining. Thank you, Miss Bird. No, I didn't say. I only gave numbers and just one abstention then. Right, 14 is the annual governance statement actions update, and it's Miss Hughes again.
Yes, so in the annual governance statement for 22-23, which was approved at PGA in June 23, we set out an associated action table for best practice governance improvements. The report covers an update as of Q3 to December 23. Section 3.5 of the covering report details the action plan. And in this reporting period, no new actions are completed, but updates have been provided. These continue to be progressed. Those actions marked in grey have previously been reported to this committee as completed. Additionally, a draft of the 23-24 annual governance statement is further on in this agenda and will continue to build on best practice.
Thank you. So the recommendations are: 1, that the committee approve the annual... Am I in the right place? 15? No, 14. Sorry. 14, diving ahead. That the committee reviews the annual governance statements table and updates below and challenges where necessary. So I so propose. Do I have a seconder for that recommendation? Councillor Stilts, thank you. Councillor Stilts.
Just one quick question on it, and it is for Mr. Winslow. And you've got down build engagement and information sharing with parish councils. Actually, have we actually started that?
Through you, Chairman. So yes, an engagement with parish councils for the local development plan review did start with during the issues and options consultation stage that was in 2022. But this action now is it's a bit more wider in terms of our general engagement as a local planning authority. We will and do engage and participate in conversations with parish councils when they're preparing neighbourhood plans. We have a statutory duty to do so, and we support those processes. And we will, from time to time, if so requested by parish or local parish, village and local councils, attend briefings or engage with them on any particular sort of planning and local place matters.
Thank you. Councillor Stamp.
Before Mr Winslow goes for the rest of his evening, can I actually ask you a question about neighbourhood plans? Because I've been given conflicting information. Obviously, Burnham on Crouch was one of the first, if not the first, in the district to adopt their neighbourhood plan. And I've been led to believe that this authority have told them not to start reviewing their policies, even though obviously the 5 years they should be reviewing them anyway. Somebody in this authority have told them not to do it until Maldon's done theirs. It was always my impression, and Councillor Pratt, because you was the chairman of the group at Maldon when we did it, that you do start to review them to make sure your policies and your information and everything is up to date within the 5 years. So can I have confirmation of what this authority is saying or what the rules are on neighbourhood plans, please?
I appreciate why you want to ask the question, but that isn't actually part of the order paper, and you did point out how long this agenda is. So I appreciate why you want to know. So I'll ask Mr Winslow to reply if he can.
I think I would have to go back to the team very specifically to ask that question because I'm not sure what specific advice has been provided to Burnham Town Council. What I would say in terms of the 5 years review, that's to do with strategic policies which are set in the local development plan rather than neighbourhood plans. But I would have to come back to the councillor on that specific question.
Thank you for that. So, members, anything else on the action update? Agree the recommendation? Thank you very much. So, item 15 is the annual governance statement. So that's found on pages 155 to 172. Again, Mrs Hughes. Lucky Mrs Hughes.
So the annual governance statement follows our adopted template to reflect SIPFA best practice advice, and it's provided as Appendix A to this report, with a recommendation that this is appended to the Statement of Accounts. The report comments on Maldon District Council's position against the 7 principles of good governance that are identified by SIPFA and Solace. Additionally, this year we have also commented on our arrangements against the SIPFA Financial Management Code, particularly Standard C, which is the leadership team demonstrates in its actions and behaviours responsibility for governance and internal control. This also addresses an action that was suggested in the LGA Finance Peer Review. On the first page of the appendix, at page 157 of your report packs, We also highlight the achievements of the 23-24 financial year in terms of our governance arrangements. And overall, we perform well against the criteria for good governance, which is also highlighted by the internal audit statement from BDO, which is on page 156 of your pack. 158, sorry. There are some comments in the report on areas of challenge, and we have also identified an action plan to build on this for 24-25. That's set out on pages 159 and 160 of your report pack. I will flag there is an error on a comment and a question mark that's been left on those pages, and we will remove that for the appended version for the statement of accounts.
Thank you. So the recommendations are: 1, the committee approve the annual governance statement at Appendix A, and this is appendix to the statement of accounts, and 2, that Performance, Governance and Audit Committee monitor the progress of the action plan identified in the AGS through a quarterly report. I so propose. Do I have a seconder, please? Anybody? Councillor Spenceley? Thank you. So, members' question? Any questions, or are you happy to go to the recommendation? Sorry.
I have one
Councillor Pratt.
clarification. On page 162, it actually shows the district council committee structure. If we agree this tonight, which subsequently goes to council at the next opportunity, will we mean that it will be at least 6 months before we could even discuss planning committees?
That's a good question. Mr. Jennett,
No,
sorry, no, Mrs. Hughes, please, if you can.
Yeah, so this document is a comment on our governance arrangement for the financial year 22-23, so it's backwards looking. So that sets out what our committee structure was in the financial year to explain sort of the governance arrangements.
So, thank you. Yes, that doesn't change anything moving ahead. It explains
So this
what
is
it
not,
was, not what it's
so
going
this
to
is
be.
not forward-looking.
No. It's backward looking.
Can't see the point
It's for the financial year.
So I agree the recommendation is what I'm concerned there.
Yeah, it's how it was during the year in question. Yeah.
I've got no questions, so I agree.
Thank you. Lovely. Now we are moving on. Okay, item 16 is contract procedure rules extension, and we have Ms. White, the procurement officer, will be presenting.
Evening, Chair. Asking for the contract procedure rules to have an agreed extension for a further year. This is based on the fact that the Procurement Act, the new Procurement Act 2023, has just been ratified as of October, and we're going to have an implementation period from March, so now, until October 24. And I'd like to ensure that we actually have all the updates and the relevant changes to support the new Procurement Act in place within our contract procedure rules.
Thank you. So the recommendation is to the council that the contract procedure rules shown at Appendix A be extended for a further year. I so propose. Do I have a seconder?
Seconded, Chairman.
Thank
And
you,
I just feel this is a bit like when you click the OK button when you actually agree the terms and conditions, and buried within them somewhere is that we give our firstborn to the government. But I certainly agree the recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Stills.
Yeah, I just wanted a quick clarification. Does this also include events? So if we have an event that is going to be put on in, say, the park or something, do they have to go through this procurement process as well?
Ms. White. Did you hear the question clearly?
I didn't hear correctly, no, sorry, it's a bit...
Sorry, could you repeat that, please, Councillor?
I was going to say, Mr. Butcher may be able to answer this, but if it's an event, will the event organisers have to go through this procurement process as well? Mr. Butcher might be
I
able
think
to.
Mr. Butcher's going to help us on this.
Yeah, thanks. Through you, Chair. Yeah, I think we wouldn't normally undertake a procurement process for an event or concession coming into Prom Park. So the procurement is normally in relation to the purchase of goods and services. we have an expression of interest which is available all year round for people to apply, and then we'll review and consider any applications that come forward. But we wouldn't normally run a procurement process for any events and concessions coming in. But obviously we have a very robust terms and conditions that will apply to anyone that's coming into our parks and open spaces.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. It is a robust process that they follow. I've worked with the team. It's absolutely robust, and it follows everything that they should. And actually, in the new rules, there will be no change to the way that they work.
Yes, Councillor
Just thank you. To follow that up though, so if somebody on the prom was going to do year on year, would they then follow a procurement process? Like if it was going to be contractual, because surely a good business plan in future, if you know you're going to get 20 grand for 5 years, you'll most probably book them up. So then would that take that format?
Mr. Butcher.
Yes. So our approach is we want to work with trusted promoters and organisers, and we do want to sign them up to multi-year agreements. But we're with the industry, it is reasonably fast moving. So whilst there's a desire from both parties, specifically for our larger events, we tend to sign up multi-year is for 2 years at a time, where we agree the fees and charges, and then we'll see where we are at the end of that period. We'd like to tie people down for longer, but I think there's just too much flexibility in the maybe not flexibility, but there's too many variables to consider by signing up to a much longer agreement in the events industry. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So can we agree the recommendation? Agree. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. White. Right, now we have Mr. Jennings. Good to see you. Good evening, Mr. Jennings. Council Constitution Planning Appeal Protocol.
Yes, Madam Chair. This item comes to your committee from your working group, the PGA working group, with an endorsement in line with what is reported here. The item actually originates from a piece of work that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee has been doing on the wider subject of planning decision making, which your committee will hear about in due course. But this was an early recommendation coming out of that piece of work that that identified the fact that the planning appeals protocol, which has been in existence and part of the Constitution since 2012, was possibly in need of some review, but at the very least a refresh to give it a higher profile, because it was evident that it perhaps had not been used or relied upon, certainly not applied in any consistent fashion. So the working group endorsed the protocol as is, because it covers a wide range of things in the management of planning appeals, but also the working group agreed some strengthening of the position or the advice contained in the protocol, and that is summarised in paragraph 3.4. But subject to that, it is a matter for council obviously to agree the revised wording of the protocol, and in order for it to be refreshed and given that higher profile, if agreed, then we can deal with that through training and briefing to chairmen of planning committees. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So the recommendation is to the Council that the Planning Appeals Protocol is reviewed, taking into account the points outlined in paragraphs 3.4 of this report, and commended to the Council for adoption as fresh as part of the Constitution. Do I have a second? I so propose. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Pratt, thank you. Questions? Councillor Stamp?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not comfortable with it. And I noticed that it was done under planning and licensing in November 2012. But actually being a person who often attends appeals in this chamber, I've been to 2 recently, I think it is, if anybody is sat and being questioned by a successful barrister, it can be very daunting, and I think it could put the council at risk. Officers are officers; they're trained in their what's the word? Their area, their law, their wherever they go, planning law. We're not. So even with the best will in the world, it is very easy when barristers are put in leading questions that a member could inadvertently put the authority at greater risk than what they actually are, in my view, that this is trying to protect it from. But that's my personal view, Madam Chair, and I would like my vote recorded that I do not support this as a way forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Spenceley.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I disagree. I think the worst case scenario is an officer who doesn't have the conviction required, having to defend a position that they have, that they don't personally subscribe to. So I think subject to the proper planning, members might even participate with relish in crossing swords with barristers, more or less successfully. But at least we'd be speaking from a position of conviction. At the end of the day, as Councillor Stamp says, we're not professionals. So there isn't an expectation that we're going to be necessarily terribly eloquent or well-versed, but we would do our best based on the decision that we had subscribed to earlier and based on the training that we had received. I've watched a couple on YouTube myself, and it is a sort of adversarial process, and it's a bit like a courtroom drama, but 10 times more boring. But I don't have a problem with it myself.
Understood. And it does mainly, this mainly comes into play when it's a member overturn of an officer recommendation to approve anyway. Councillor Stills.
Yeah, I actually would like to agree actually with Councillor Stamp. The officers are trained, they know their planning laws, and they know what they are speaking about. And if they find it difficult to present their case, then that's down to them. As a member of the council, as a councillor, I wouldn't like to stand up in front of a barrister to be grilled on my views, and so I wouldn't support this either.
I don't think it's actually mandatory, but it becomes the officer's problem when members vote against the officer's professional opinion.
I mean, my view is very much. Yeah, I agree with you, Chair, that it's very difficult if an officer has made a decision, he's been overturned, to then argue against the council, really. So I think, in a way, I would agree with Councillor Spenceley, to be honest. And I think I do agree that most of us wouldn't be able to do and deal with a barrister, because I've also seen the appeal, and it's pretty scary. But one or two of us are pretty eloquent and do understand planning quite well, and I think we could champion those to speak for us. We could delegate those particular councillors to take over if necessary, and they could speak for the turnover, where an officer who has made a decision is in a very difficult position to actually stand up and then argue against himself, in a sense.
Oh, Councillor Spencer.
Yes, as a supplementary, Chair, it might focus our minds when, as members, we are going against officer decisions. I mean, there will be occasions when we will do so, but we need to think of the consequences.
Councillor Stamp.
I take on board these comments, but we are elected to represent our residents, and if we're going to feel we can't go against officers' decisions, you may as well abolish all the planning committees and give it back to the officers to make the recommendation.
Well, yes, but that isn't. With respect, that's not what it says. With respect, that's not what it says at all. I mean, my point was merely that, well, speaking frankly, if a proposer of an overturn doesn't have the courage of their conviction, should they really be making that proposal? But I have Councillor Pratt, and I think Councillor Burwell wants to speak as well.
I haven't finished.
Sorry, I'll bring Mr. Jennings in a moment.
Could Mr. Jennings just clarify? The report says that we should review this constitutional document.
It doesn't have to be.
I assumed that the appendix was the reviewed one and was a recommendation. Is this the original 2012 document that we're now being asked to change? Because I don't think we could actually go through it line by line unless we just say there are no changes. And Councillor Stamp makes a valid point that there are some points. But this is, I thought this was the procedure that we are already adopting, and this is what is expected of members when something goes to appeal. A member, and I can remember at local planning committees where someone was nominated when the committee went against officer's recommendation that if an appeal is lodged, this person would be called upon to stand up and say, why did we go against the officer's recommendation? So as it stands, I think this is the way we do it. Now, whether it needs modifying, I don't. I think this is fine. But is this the right forum for this document actually to be looked at? Do we need to send it somewhere to be
Well, the recommendation is to council, but Mr Jennings, please come in and sort us out.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to emphasise a couple of points, as Councillor Pratt has just said, this has been the protocol that has been there to be used, but as I mentioned in my introduction, it has not been used or considered at the point of decision where an officer's recommendation has been overturned, or where circumstances apply. It has been used from time to time. It has not been used consistently. This is why the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, in its work on planning decision making, and this position was agreed by your committee's working group, that it needed a refresh, a higher profile, and strengthened with a little bit more certainty as to what will happen at the point of decision within a committee. I would just point out that it doesn't follow that a member having been nominated means that a member will be on the stand or giving evidence on each and every occasion. Paragraph or section 1.4 of the protocol, sorry, not 1.4, 1.6 gives an explanation that during the process of the appeal, the Director of Service Delivery has got delegated powers, if you like. This is what the protocol recognises in managing the planning appeal process. The Director of Service Delivery will, and the first bullet point says, determine on a case-by-case basis whether it would be necessary to either seek the nominated member or an external planning consultant. And part of the reason for requiring an alternative representation, if you like, through an appointed member or a planning consultant is because of the compromised position of the officer that made the recommendation in the first place. And this reflects advice given by the Royal Town Planning Institute, which I'm sure Mr Winslow can speak on with more authority than I. Thank you.
But can I confirm this appendix is the current situation? This is the one current one?
It is the current version with a couple of items of strengthening to say with more certainty that the committee will consider the implications of this protocol on an officer overturn.
Right. So if we don't refer this to council, most of this, the essence of this, remains in place.
Yes, it does.
So we're not taking anything away by not recommending to council. That's what I was driving at. Thank you very much. Councillor Sam.
For clarity then, so you're talking about putting 3.4 into page 203. 1.21 on page 203. Because you're on about changing the wording from the current one, which none of us really knew existed, in all honesty, except for Councillor Pratt. And you're on about doing it. So you are actually going to change it. And the point that I'd like to come back on when we was talking about officers feeling they can't defend a recommendation or whatever, there is a process normally that goes on here, that it's not just the officer, it goes through a chain. And sometimes when the officer does that report, they maybe, when they get to their bosses, but this is what I've been told, that they can actually change that recommendation. So it's not set in stone that when an officer writes that report,
No,
it is that officer's view. So I don't see the issue of whether they then turn around and have to defend it or not, because they may not have come to that conclusion, and they would have to do that anyway because of the process this council already adopts. I'd just like to be clear.
Yeah, I think we need Mr. Winslow on this, if you could help us out with that, because I know there are different kinds, different levels of application are dealt with at different levels, can be signed off at different levels.
So when applications are coming to committee, they have been signed off by a senior officer with the authority to make the recommendation. So although the case officer may be a particular individual, the planning applications, if you like, the route to get them to committee, they're signed off by the case officer and also by a senior officer. The senior officer is then taking also the professional responsibility for the recommendation. So in terms of the conflict that can sometimes happen between when an officer has made a recommendation and the committee, quite within its rights, may have formed a different view and determined that for a different amount of weight or a different reasoning in order to refuse an application. The challenging process that's recognised by the Royal Town Planning Institute is that professional officer, regardless of your view as a committee, has to uphold their professional view. That's where the conflict happens, and the Royal Town Planning Institute guidance is that it's better to avoid that situation. It's better to the local planning authority to avoid the situation that a planning inspector or a barrister asks the officer on the stand, really, whether or not in their professional opinion, what they would do, when that's already written down in a report that the committee had already considered. It's in those situations whereby what would normally happen is that if an officer felt that they can't, that the decision of the committee is so far removed from their professional view that they couldn't, that they think that it risked the appeal really from having fair hearing, that in those situations, a third party, who is often a planning consultant, we would search for someone that is professionally able to support the case the committee had reached. And in these situations, this is just to ensure that the committee's decision is adequately articulated to a planning inspector at the appeals, given that it's the committee as a collective governance board, I guess, has the ability to have its opinion expressed. But officers of the Royal Town Planning Institute would be in breach of the professional code of conduct if they were to defend a decision even of one of the planning committees, if it was so far removed from their professional opinion.
Thank you. Members, can I suggest that the proper place to debate this is in fact at council and not amongst just we few, and that we could agree the recommendation?
Through you, Chair. I mean, if it ain't broke, why fix it in a sort of thing, really? I mean, are we it's all there and we've been using it up to this point. So perhaps you're right. Perhaps this should go to committee rather than.
I'm in your hands, members. I just want to know what to do with this recommendation.
Chairman,
Could we please take a vote on the recommendation?
I think the debate around is whether we change the word should to will, because the current policy says we should do this, and now there's been a recommendation from, I believe, the working group that says the word should be changed to will. And to be honest, I don't see the argument, because whether it should be or whether it will be, members at a local committee will decide if they want someone to represent them. They should do it, but whether we can say they will do it, I just think this is a very weak point to spend an awful long time debating. And the more we talk about it, the less I feel inclined to change it.
Okay. Well, so the recommendation is, as I said, we've proposed and seconded that. So are we going to agree the recommendation? No, I'm not. Or not? Or not? Okay, those in favour of the recommendation, can we take a vote? No, one. Okay, those against? So the recommendation falls. Mr. Jennings, what happens next? We just leave it. We don't put a recommendation to council at all, and we stay in status quo.
Yes, it does, because the document is there in the constitution. You would only be recommending to council if you were proposing any change.
Okay, right, there we go. Nothing's changing, we're leaving it as it is. So we have one more item. Remember, we have one more item, then the exclusion of the public. Not that there are any, but we go off. Yes, I realise that. I'm in your hands. Remember, we're nearly there, or we could be. Or do you wish to adjourn? I don't even know when we might be adjourning to be honest. But those who are prepared to continue till say 10:30 and get this finished. That looks like a majority to me. So, thank you very much. So, item 18.
I agree if we have a comfort break for 2 or 3 minutes.
Yes, of course, members. I'm going to adjourn. Can I adjourn the meeting, Miss Bird, for 10 minutes?
You can, so I just want to clarify, so under the procedure rules, we're agreeing that you're going to continue past the 3 hours? Yeah. It just, I have to
Well, we're not 3 hours yet. We're 3 hours
Right,
at 10:30.
That's
So,
fine.
so I'm counting on finishing by 10:30. If not, I will adjourn.
Okay, that's fine.
But
Yeah.
we're having not many of us,
Adjourning for a comfort break.
a comfort break, 5-minute comfort break, members. Returning at 10:05.
You're live, Chair. Thank you. We're live again. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We're live again, and we recommence this meeting at 10:05, hopefully to finish by 10:30. So item 18 is Council Constitution. Again, it's about scheme of delegation in service delivery, presented by Mr. Jennings.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This report comes in the wake of the recent restructure of the Service Delivery Directorate, and it deals essentially with the principles of delegation, not the substance. And the reason why it's come forward is now that the Service Delivery Directorate, which is a very diverse and extensive directorate, now that it has been restructured in significantly clear functional areas with assistant directors heading those functional responsibility areas, it is entirely logical and it makes administrative sense to redistribute the delegation that is currently, everything in that service directorate is currently delegated to the director. It makes sense to redistribute those delegated powers to the 3 assistant directors according to their clear functional responsibilities. That is what this report is essentially about. And of course the appendix, which is set out on pages 211 to 219 of your pack, shows that redistribution with a small number of items being reserved to the director. It will then, if the committee finds favour with this and it goes to council and is agreed, it would then be for the assistant directors to review their own areas of delegation. I know for a fact that in some areas it does need reviewing, not necessarily in terms of substance again, but to bring it up to date. A huge amount of legislation is referred to in this delegation, and it will need some refined bringing up to date, and it's best that the assistant directors do that in accordance with their own responsibilities. But for now, this is the principle of delegation and a proposed redistribution of existing delegation to the 3 assistant directors.
Thank you, Mr. Jennings. So recommendations are to the council. 1, that the council is recommended to agree to the redistribution of the powers currently delegated to the Director of Service Delivery to the assistant directors, service delivery as proposed and shown at Appendix A to this report. And 2, that the council is recommended to agree the consequential changes referred to in paragraphs 3.6 and 3.7 of this report, namely to the list of proper officer designations set out in the scheme of delegation general provisions document in the Constitution, and the transfer of the delegated powers in relation to neighbourhood planning from the Director of Strategy and Resources to the relevant Assistant Director, Planning and Implementation. I so propose. Do I have a second?
I'm happy to second it for the benefit of the debate, but I do question, because the council is considering our organisation is as general as I can place it because of private and confidential matters. Is this the right time to be proposing this change in our constitution?
Mr. Holmes.
Thank you, Chairman. And I am involved in that process, obviously, but I think what we have set out. Thank you. But what we have set out in the report this evening wouldn't be impacted upon by whatever decision members make, because this is the delegation down to assistant director level, and your review is looking at the corporate leadership team level. So whether you had a chief executive, a deputy chief executive, or any other form of structure, then the sub-delegations that sit underneath those officers would still be there. So I think you can, and I think we did think about that before should we take this forward, but we're confident that this time this is appropriate, And as Mr Jennings has set out very clearly, why it is logical to do that. And I would like to take the opportunity to thank Mr Jennings for this quite detailed work that he's undertaken with the team to bring this report to you tonight.
And I would add how nice it is to see Mr Jennings back in our midst. Yes, certainly doing the job he's very, very well qualified for. So I would support the recommendation.
I think, if anything, it simplifies matters with the changes you mentioned. And in essence, I think we're saying, why would we have assistant directors who still have to turn to their director to get anything signed off in their departments? Does that about sums it up, doesn't it?
It does, Chair, and the technical knowledge and now we have actually reshaped the directorate so that it has the sort of functional areas. It's entirely logical that the assistant directors are responsible for those functions in a very clear way now, have those delegations.
Okay, Councillor Stamp?
Yeah, I shared similar concerns to Councillor Pratt. Personally, I won't support it because I think we should wait for the reasons that Councillor Pratt said. And I won't say any more because it's an open session.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? So can we go to a vote on the recommendations to council? Those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those against? 6, sorry. Those against? 1 against, 1 abstention. Thank you. So that does go forward to council. Right. Item 19, any other items of business the chairman of the committee decides are urgent? There are none. Item 20 is exclusion of the public and press. To resolve that under section 100A brackets 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following item of business on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A to the Act, and that this satisfies the public interest test. I so propose. Do I have a seconder, please? That's Councillor Burwood. Thank you very much. So we're going to turn the live stream off. Ms.